All right, so today is the book Philosophy: A Crash Course. Um, Kind of an odd one. It's an appropriate title. It's a crash course. It says, become an instant expert on the front of it, and no, you're not going to. But that being said, it is great for basics. Like, I did really enjoy it for that fashion. I'm not really going to say who it's by just because I'm going to voice some criticism about it here. And this might become more of a rant than I really want it to. But anyway, so the book started off pretty good. I actually, when I first started reading it, I found myself just like pouring through it for like hours, just on my floor, just going through each page because it was interesting. It would have, the philosophical idea that was brought up, and then it would have the drill down, kind of get a little bit deeper into the concept, bring up a few more points or something like that, and then it'd have the switch up, which was basically, some dissenting opinion about that philosophy or something that kind of contradicted it. And it was interesting. It brought up a lot of those notions. And so it was something that I was really enjoying reading through it until I started seeing a bit of a pattern that was frustrating to say the least. So, this book was like $10. It was cheap. Barnes and Noble, that's why I got it. I tried to get the tag off, and apparently I tore the cover because I guess it's like made of cardboard. So the real annoyance I have with this book, the real problem I have with this one, and this is where it gets a little bit controversial, is the notion of gender. Make no mistake, it's a conversation that needs to be had, and there's a lot of ignorant people out there that need to have that conversation. I don't know how much it fits into philosophy as opposed to something like psychology or sociology. That being said, it doesn't fit that much. It's rampant in this book. Like, you can't get away from it. At first, I just tried to ignore it. I just kept going through. But it was getting to the point where it was a little ridiculous. Like, I got to this section on reality. It's like one of the final sections on reality. And so all of philosophical thought, through all of history, all the philosophers observing reality, trying to, get through all these notions, try to weed out what's false, find what's true, debating about this. And the quote they chose for reality was about gender. It was something along the lines of like, instead of asking what gender is, we can ask what we want it to be. And honestly, who the fuck cares? Reality for all of philosophy, and we're talking about gender. Jesus, at the end of the day, they're giving bell hooks more stage time than someone like Aristotle or Socrates. I hardly even saw him in there except for the kind of original sections. They bring up bell hooks multiple times as if she's like some world-renowned thinker that's breaking down all these barriers. And yeah, she has some points, but they're not that amazing, and they're not that important, and they're not that novel or interesting. And at the same time, they don't really have much of a drill down for those sections. Right when it comes to the notions of gender or anything that might be seen as like, you don't want to get in trouble talking about that stuff. Right when it gets there, it's just kind of like, yeah, no, this is definitely true. There's no way this could possibly be wrong. It's all good. And the thing is when they brought up stuff, a lot of those times they'd bring up problems, but there would be an absence of solutions. Like it would be some huge problem with the patriarchy, just like the ambiguous patriarchy, which I'm not saying is a good thing. So frankly, I didn't really understand it when I started reading these things. The book wasn't doing it justice, so I started looking into this stuff online, trying to understand as much as I could. I wasn't really finding solutions. It was more of just pointing angrily, just getting really upset at something that existed, just like, that's the problem, and then be like, what's the solution? I don't know, but that's the problem. And it kind of just boiled down to that. And again, and a big thing though with the gender stuff is I feel like that conversation isn't about whether gender exists or something, because sure, like the quote on reality said, it's up to us if we decide that it exists. It's an esoteric thought that we all collectively have. It's an identification. It can be whatever we want it to be. So sure, it can exist. I have no interest in debating the elements of gender. That being said, what the answer I feel is, or I think is something more along the lines of what Eckhart Tolle talks about, of not combining an identification to the concept of I, in the notion that I guess it would fit with me is I don't exclusively consider myself a cis male man, because that's just a label. It's ambiguous, and at this point it's weirdly derogatory, which is odd. But that being said, I'm just me. That's it. I'm just me. It doesn't have to be paired with an identification. I am the components that makes me me. And let's say I was I don't know, genderqueer. I really hope I'm not using an offensive term here, because it's kind of hard to keep track, honestly. But let's say I was gender dysphoric, which again, I apologize if that's the wrong thing. it wouldn't matter for other people. It doesn't matter. I would not impose, like, if I felt like a pronoun, excuse me, if I felt like that fit me, then I wouldn't impose that on others. I wouldn't make them say it. You know, it's because it doesn't matter. Like, it's selfish, frankly. So, like, when it comes back to this stuff, like I said, it's a conversation that needs to be had. It really needs to be had. And in many ways, the conversation has taken place. There's a lot of things a lot of walls have been knocked down. There are some, some bastions of ignorance, mainly in certain areas. I live in America, so there's certain areas you can definitely believe that stuff is still a problem. Where there's people who are just ignorantly pushing against or discriminating, and that stuff is just objectively bad. I mean, it's discrimination, whatever kind. It's still discrimination. Like I said, in no way am I arguing the validity of something like gender. It's just the factor that in a philosophy book, I don't think it has that much weight. It shouldn't be brought up that many times. And just because it is the modern era, it doesn't mean that it merits the rampant shoving of that notion into everything. Like I've heard more just anecdotally of kind of like the academic or the influence on academics that gender has had. I don't know who these authors are. Unfortunately, I didn't do any research into that. So, whatever kind of person you are, I cannot speak for that. I don't know. That being said, I don't know if they were pushed, or I don't know if they were influenced by, the modern academia. And I don't know if that really exists with that notion of influence. But that being said, it shouldn't have this much place in a book on philosophy. Somebody like bell hooks should not have as much, spotlight as somebody like Aristotle or Socrates. Regardless how wrong they might have been, the amount of influence people like that have had on the notion of philosophy, on our perception of reality, merits more conversation, merits more spotlight than somebody like bell hooks. Again, I don't think she's wrong. I don't really disagree with stuff she talks about. It's relatively inconsequential, the stuff she talks about. And I know it's easy to be like, oh, he's just a white man, whatever. Like, I have no stake in this conversation. I don't really care, honestly. I just wanted to learn some philosophy. And I did, which was great. So, but I wanted to learn some philosophy, not philosophy with subjective sociology involved. That being said, for the notions of the philosophical concepts, brought up in this book, I want to recommend it, but big grain of salt, big asterisk, just like, I'm not sure really. I think it's an excellent starting point. No, you will not become an instant expert, but it's a really good starting point. You get some really great ideas. You get some, some concepts to look into beyond this. I think they do well with the philosophical concepts to kind of drive into them. Anything that isn't really brought up is obviously kind of at stake at just the convenience and buffet style of this book. But I like that notion. It's simple. It's straightforward. I enjoyed it, except for that really, abundant problem. So I hope this doesn't create too much controversy, because as far as I can tell, I didn't say anything controversial. That being said, it's 2019, so I'm probably wrong. But yeah. So if you guys are interested in just some basics for philosophy, you haven't read crazy amount of philosophy, not a bad starting point. I would still recommend a lot of Greek thought, checking out things like Ryan Holiday with Obstacle is the Way, and Thoughts, Letters from a Stoic, I want to say it is. That's not Ryan Holiday, I don't think. But yeah, places like that, Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, those are excellent books on philosophy, more so of the Stoic realm, but that's more of my alley anyway. I just wanted more of an abundant starting place, and this book did fill that role fairly well. Aside from that criticism I brought up, I did enjoy this. So, I mean, the people who wrote it, they did do a great job. It's just that frustrating element. So, I'll probably do Rise and Grind as my next book. And until then, I'll see you guys later.